Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Learning Guild. We're in week 11 of a 12-week xAPI cohort. We're at the stretch here. So we have a great session for you today. We have data-driven decision-making, custom dashboards for learner insights. And we have Wendy Morgan and Matt Kliewer. And we are going to go get started. But before we do, I am going to first go through a few things. So first, DevLearn, couple of weeks, just 2 weeks till DevLearn. There is a register now button. I'm also going to drop those links in the chat after I'm done speaking, and you will see those links. And then the online registration closes in just a week. We have a new research report, the state of data and analytics, quite topical for this particular session. That is available to Learning Guild members for free, and membership is free. Don't forget our xAPI party November 2nd from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can definitely register for it and see a lot of this different work that was done during the cohort, as well as other case studies and projects that people have brought that contain xAPI to showcase how xAPI can meet their needs. And of course, this is the Learning Guild. If you're not a member, like I said before, join us. It's free. You get a lot of benefits, discounts on face-to-face. You get those research reports. You get webinars. It's a great thing. And then, of course, at the end of our session today, we do have that quick check-in. If there is a project team or a team who would like to show their work, obviously, if you've just created a new team, great, let us know about it. We would love to hear about it, and let us know how you're advancing with working with API during this cohort. You can just private message me, Karen Gleason, and I'll be sure to get you in at the end of our cohort today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop presenting, and I'm going to turn things over to Wendy and Matt.
Great. Thank you so much. Let me get my presentation up and ready. All right, so thank you for joining us here today, everybody. Matt Kliewer and I are going to be presenting data-driven decision-making, custom dashboards for learner insights. I'm Wendy Morgan. I work at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute, which is a research institute at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And just kind of in the agenda for where we're going to go today, although we are going to be focusing on data visualization, I'm a learning strategist, so I'm going to want to be situating that within both the conceptual sort of context of the projects that we're working on, and then the logistic context of the workplace that I work within. And then we'll delve into two separate projects as case studies. Those are xAPI and My MTSSTA Center. And you'll notice that those are very acronymy because, you know, within academia, we sort of live in an acronym world. And once I spell those out, you'll understand why. All right, so on to the background and sort of the conceptual context for the work that we're going to be talking about here today. So the entire point of collecting data is to use it. And in fact, you have to know how you want to use it in order to collect the data that you want to use. So, and you also have to know how you want to use it in order to plan the data visualization that you're going to, that is going to support that use. So you have to have a plan for why you're collecting this data and what you're going to do with it in the end in order to plan both the data collection and the data visualization. And then those visualization and collection plans impact one another. So for example, as you design your data visualization, you might find that there are certain ways of collecting the data that would be more or less useful. And so you'll want to design the way that you collect data to support that. Or conversely, you may find that the way that you want to set up a learning experience or an interaction is going to result in a specific kind of data. And so you're going to want to plan your visualization to accommodate that. In the really big picture, I think it's helpful to sort of think about your data, the data that you capture from your learning experiences as a metaphor for that being the photography of a life event, right? So it's not the event itself, but it's all you have left when it's done. and it's what's going to represent it. And the way that you use that is going to affect the memories going forward of what that was. So with that understood, or that sort of just conceptual context, let's turn to the logistic context so that you kind of have an understanding for the kind of work that we're doing and the environment that we're doing it within. So Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute is a research institute. And so that I can stop saying Frank Porter Graham, I'm going to say FPG. That's why we use these acronyms. It is a unique workplace in that it's less of a cohesive organization and more of like an umbrella over a bunch of smaller businesses, almost like little entrepreneurial businesses. Because within this research institute are lots of projects that are each grant funded or foundation funded. They have their own funding source. So they have their own mission, their own vision, their own websites, their own learners, their own staff. And there might be some overlap between different projects, but not always. So an LMS for our research institute is just completely not workable. You can't herd, it would be like trying to use the professional development plans for every store in a strip mall and just make them all one. It doesn't work. It's all different businesses, right? So we can't really have a shared LMS environment, and we want to collect data from websites. So this LRS xAPI infrastructure is definitely the best fit for this particular working environment. And then I think it's important as we look at the work that we're going to be presenting here today also to understand just a little bit about the kinds of training that we're doing within these research or foundation, whatever grant funded projects. And one of the most important things is that we don't do anything internal. So talent development is just not something that is funded internally for these projects. And the reason for that is that the staff of the projects themselves, that's not the target of the funding priority. So the funding priority for these funders that are supporting these projects is whatever community groups need the help. So we are going to be providing training for groups like educational administration at the state or the district level in public schooling. We might provide professional development for folks at agencies providing family therapy or for home interventionists. So everything is external and community focused. And beyond that, there are these 3 levels usually of any kind of training that we provide. So we provide, the first is universal, and I'm going to use the word technical assistance because that is a word that we use a lot in our world. And essentially what that means is that we are trying to train up skills to implement an evidence-based practice so that it is being implemented as intended to get the outcomes as intended. So it's kind of a technical term, but it's in almost every one of these grants. So almost every funding proposal requires some level of universal technical assistance or TA, and that means that it's accessible to everyone. So everyone can get it. So that's everything on the website. So there might be job aids, self-paced e-learning, something that literally it's just public facing, anyone can come and get it. And then there's targeted and intensive TA, which is more like a low and high touch coaching support. And that's when you've identified a team that you're going to go support, and you're going to set up a goal with that team, and you're going to support them to reach those goals. So those are usually the tiers of service and the training that our projects provide. And I think it's just helpful to understand, both the conceptual sort of strategy at all of how you use data, and then the situation within which you are utilizing that data. So with that background, let's dive into these case studies, xAPI and MyMTSS TA Center. All right, so we're going to spell this first one out, xAPI. It is State Implementation and Scaling Up of Evidence-Based Practices. And no one wants to say that over and over again. So we just say xAPI. And that's how the acronyms are born in academia. So for xAPI is federally funded. And the purpose of this project is to support the state level of administration of public schools who are implementing evidence-based practices, usually to address academic gaps, but with some some layer of inclusion or equity involved. So reducing a racial achievement gap for math instruction, or making sure that students with disabilities can reach their reading goals by 3rd grade. So it's an equity and inclusion focused support to public schools at the state level. And the need that they had when they came to the instructional design team was to do things faster and cheaper and better all at the same time. So I'm sure none of you have ever had that issue, but they did. So what we decided to do to address that need was to leverage their universal TA or their e-learning pre-work to make their targeted and intensive TA levels more effective and efficient. So we're going to use e-learning pre-work to inform follow-up synchronous supports at those sort of higher coaching levels. And the plan for the data use is to tailor that synchronous support to the learner needs and strengths that are evident once we put those folks through the e-learning pre-work. So we get kind of like a first pass at how they would approach an issue, and then we can coach them further. So the plan for the data collection is to understand what those strengths and weaknesses are aligned with the lesson-based learning objectives. All right, so let's talk about the data visualization that supports that. So we have a traffic light dashboard, and it looks like this. So this is a lesson. This is the dashboard that we would see from a lesson on capacity assessment, which is just a skill that they want to train for some of these administrative folks, especially at the state level. And there's 4 learning objectives associated with this lesson. So if I am going to go and support this team, you can see the names are cut off of the left just to sort of preserve anonymity. And because it's universal, everybody that takes the e-learning is generating data, but I can generate this report based on the team that I'm serving. So we put in the names or the emails of the team members that we're going to go and support further through our targeted or intensive support. And then we get the results for just that team. And so this is what I would see if I was a coach of a team. I would give them this lesson as pre-work, and then I would see how they did through this lesson. And this tells me what I should focus on or maybe not focus on. It seems like they're doing pretty well at defining the key purposes of a capacity assessment. It seems like there's some pretty big variability in terms of their ability to identify the relevant assessments. And it seems like there's one person that might not have a total handle on how to administer a capacity assessment, but otherwise they're doing okay. And identifying the key constructs underlying a capacity assessment might need a little refresher, right? And that's important knowledge going in. Whereas otherwise I just wouldn't know. I would start from 0 and tell them everything, right? And this way I can do things faster and cheaper and better all at the same time. And then once we have the overview, we can also what we call drill down. So we have these drill down reports. So let's say in this learning objective number 4, I want to take a look at the second person in my team and why they're struggling or how they're struggling a little bit with administering a capacity assessment. Maybe I want to pull them out and give them a little refresher without keeping the entire team hostage to that, since the rest of them seem like they have a handle on it. So I would take a look at what we call the drill down report. And these drill down reports give you the details of the learner activity throughout the interactions within that lesson. So this particular drill down report illustrates all of the choices that were made within a virtual scenario in which a capacity assessment is being administered. So it starts from the beginning of that team interaction, and then they have choices of how they're going to act at at each point throughout. And you can take a look at the periods that they had difficulty. So where did they struggle during this capacity assessment? And although this is a screenshot, I think it scrolls down to like 14 questions or something like that. But you can take a look at how, which ones they struggled with. So which ones they got correct or not, or I guess in this report, which ones they got incorrect or not, for whatever reason, that's how we structured it. But so you can look at those drill down reports, and each one is different depending on the lesson and the learner interactions that were designed within that lesson. So this is a different drill down report. It's actually within a different lesson altogether. But in this case, learners are asked to take a look at the team members that they're supporting, because at the state administration level, those folks are kind of doing the same job that we're doing for them, only for the district folks. So they're being asked to identify a district team, a district implementation team, and the way in which those team members are aligned with the problem that they're tasked with solving. And within this lesson, it's a lesson about which team members you want for which jobs. So you've got your correct answer and the answer that they provided as one of the drill downs. So you can really start to look at what is behind those traffic lights. But the traffic light itself is just a really nice way of getting a sense of what you're going to need to focus on and what you don't need to focus on when you go to plan your follow-up synchronous supports with these teams. All right, so big picture. A note, something that's pretty important to note about this particular data visualization is that what you're seeing here reflects a lot of iterative development. So we started with something that looked very much more primitive, and folks used it and gave us feedback, and we designed it and improved it accordingly. And now we use it for even other things. So for example, CSEP just started a national micro-credentialing program with a social learning component, and we're leveraging those same e-learning lessons and the same data that we use to give to coaches out in the field. We're using that same data. We're putting the micro-credentialing participants through the lessons and then looking at that team's strengths and weaknesses to decide how we want to focus their social learning component of the micro-credentialing program. So it's become very useful to us. And that said, I think it's important to take a look at, so what does the data do? This data is meant to inform follow-up coaching, and I think it does that. And what does it not do too? So when we look at this in terms of the relevance to the overall program success of CSEP, this e-learning and blended support is just one piece of that a much bigger project. So there are pre-post surveys for lots of things. There's a whole host of other program level assessments. And this traffic light data dashboard is meant to provide formative data. So in other words, it's how are people making choices as they're learning about a thing. And that helps us know where they are at with their learning when we go to coach them, but we're not assessing the impact or the effect of the e-learning with that formative data. We would need pre-post data or something like that in order to assess that. So it's important to know, if we go back to that, how are we using the data, and what data are we collecting, and what is the visualization? We also need to understand what is it not, right? What is that data not? Okay, so on to the second case study, MyMTSSTA Center, which stands for Michigan's Multi-Tiered System of Support Technical Assistance Center, which I have to take a breath after just saying that. So at least there's some acronym, although the acronym itself is super long anyway. They have state and district funding. So this is not a national level project. This is a state project, and they actually have district funds to do some of this work as well. Their purpose is to support public school implementation teams scaling up evidence-based practices as they relate to multi-tiered systems of support, which has a lot to do with kids and behavior through schools and how we support them to get through school successfully. In this case, the project that they brought to us was very much more narrow in scope. So they specifically wanted some help in implementation and scale up of a multi-tiered system of support called Positive Behavioral Intentions and Supports, or PBIS. And you may have heard of that before. But it's essentially a way of responding to disruptive child behavior in terms of positive ways. So doing some teaching, restructuring things, making it so that you don't have a lot of conflict. You kind of remove the conflict from the situation as much as you can and make it easier for kids to understand how they're supposed to be behaving. But they were having some real trouble implementing and scaling this up because they were finding that there was a lot of skepticism among teachers, and there wasn't a lot of well-identified support for those school-based coaches that were supposed to be driving the scale-up of PBIS at the school level. So that was their problem and their need. And what we chose to do was to design a choose-your-own-adventure e-learning experience where school staff could really try out not implementing PBIS, implementing some aspects of PBIS, implementing the whole program of PBIS, and different ways to do that while getting to see what the outcomes would be of that and getting to see what the student experience was of that. And then we wanted to take data from that sort of choose your own adventure to tailor performance support materials that we would provide to those school-based coaches to use during the staff meetings that they're supposed to be using to scale up the program. So the plan for the data use was to indicate which performance support materials to provide to coaches. So we wanted to provide performance support materials that would match the attitude of the staff that they were supporting. And so we identified 3 different possible attitudes. One was they're bought in, they're going to do the positive behavioral interventions and supports, so they just really need a little bit of direction and tweaking. The second one was punitive. They really think that punishment drives better behavior. And the third one was more of a hands-off approach, where they thought that families and the students themselves should be responsible for those behaviors, and they're really there to instruct, and they're not going to do anything about this. So our plan for data collection, and I'm just going to kind of put up a picture drawn from the choose your own adventure while I talk about this part of it, just so that you have, it's not the same slide and we can kind of just imagine going through a choose your own adventure. If you are going through something that's designed to be sort of fun, where you're encouraged to choose a failure path to see what happens, and you're also encouraged to just play around and find out as much as you can, your choices are not terribly interpretable in terms of the data that you get out of them. Because what does it mean? If I choose a path that leads to a poor student outcome, I'm still learning about that. And am I just enjoying the heck out of this choose your own adventure? Or am I really making choices that you would expect to observe in a real life situation? We don't know. So we didn't collect any. We just told them, play with it. This is something there for you to play with. And so what we planned for the data collection instead was a pre-post test change, and what happened, what choices they would make before or after the choose your own adventure experience. And the way that we decided to differentiate the performance support materials that we provided to coaches was based on the attitudes that were present in the post-test, because we assumed that those would be the attitudes that the coaches would be dealing with. Even if they had changed a lot from the e-learning, the fact that they changed, great, the coaches are going to have to follow up with things the way they are. So let's take a look at what that means. The pre-post test, this is a picture of what it looked like in the e-learning product. So before they got to the choose your own adventure, they were given a little sort of pre-story. So it was some kids having a difficult time on the playground, things are getting a little rough. What do you do? And they were asked to rank different ways of responding to this situation based on what they thought would be most to least effective. And there are 2 responses in this set of possible responses that are positive, and those are teach and practice how to use the equipment and how to disagree, and structure the playground into zones and rotate by grade levels. So those ones that I've placed in that 1 and 2 rank within this screenshot, those are the positive ones. And then there are a couple of punitive ones, suspensions and loss of time on the playground. And then there are a couple of sort of hands-off type ones, like parents need to do this and students know what to do. They just need to do it. And so we took a look at how they ranked that before, and then we also did the exact same story and ranking after, although there was a lot of, we told them that they would see the story again. We let them skip the video if they wanted to, but it's the same thing. And then they're going to rank how they would approach the situation. So how did we visualize this? Well, we provided the difference, because we wanted to see the change. So we provided the percentage of difference between the folks that ranked the positive or PBIS friendly responses in the top 2 rankings, pre versus post. And this is just one example of a district. They could look at this by any individual district or school, or you can look at it overall. And this is an example of one of the districts. And you can see there were 13 people that ranked in the top 2 choices pre-test, and there were 19 people that ranked in the top 2 or in those most effective slots post-test. And then we also had these same graphs that we provided for punitive responses and responses outside of staff control, or those sort of hands-off responses. And the idea was that whichever response category was ranked most highly in the post-test, that would determine the category of performance supports that would be provided to the school-based coaches, and the MAMTSS TA Center staff would be making those differentiations. Okay, so notes. First of all, this was kind of one of those projects where the contract ended and then they had their stuff. So there wasn't a lot of time for, feedback and iterative development. And even when I was, preparing for this presentation, I was looking at the data visualizations and thinking, I bet we could probably make those better over time if we wanted to, depending on how they were received or used, or, we would need feedback from folks using them in order to make them better for the folks using them. So revision over time is just key for anything if you really want to make it good. And then in terms of relevance to program success, this digital experience that we provided, again, is just one piece of a much larger program. So there's other pre-post data from other assessments within their program. But because it's a pre-post test, it actually is summative data. So the effect of the e-learning is actually assessed and can be correlated with the other data if you want to. You'd have to take a look at what you're correlating, but it conceivably can be put up against other assessments so that you can see what portion might have been the e-learning and what portion might have been the other things. So that's also helpful. All right, that is what I have to give you for case studies. That's what we got. So are there any questions that we should be addressing?
There were a couple. I will just throw out the first one. Will we be getting a copy of today's presentation? Can we provide the PowerPoint or PDF or something?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. And then one question, I'll just read it as is. Slightly off-topic question, but how do you get participation in pre-post surveys, etc.? So obviously it's going to depend on the project.
Right. Yeah. So there's different ways that we do pre-post surveys in different projects. For this one, they couldn't advance without doing the pre. And I guess they could have dropped out for the post, but also this was part of a professional development piece. And so their completions were actually counted. And so they would be prompted to complete it by their supervisors. So compliance in this case was probably one way that we got the pre-post to be completed. Oftentimes in other programs, we just send out something like Qualtrics surveys pre-post, and there's usually motivation to complete those because a lot of what we're doing is we're providing support to teams that want that support and are, could benefit from that support. And if they have things to say about, how we could do it better, they're usually good at saying that.
All right. I got one more question just came in. What system did you use to compile completions from start to end? Was it within LMS or was it LRS? And actually, if that's okay, I can answer that one.
Yep.
So these projects actually don't have a dedicated LMS, although there are some variations that had a website with authentication where people launched from. But a lot of these are actually just hosted on FPD's website, and we created a custom login that specifically sends to. So we're using Veracity LRS, and so we created multiple LRSs for each grant-funded project so that they're separated. But then they have a custom login, and I say login, it's really just put their name and email in there so that we know who the actor is for the xAPI data. So then in terms of completions, these are storyline projects and RISE projects. So we're using the built-in statements for launch and complete and everything in between. And then we also have a lot of custom statements in there. So these projects actually were the kind of the catalyst for xAPI, actually. So we started with a sort of a custom-made version where we needed some custom statements, and then eventually it was like, well, we could probably put this together for other things that might need this type of thing. This is before Storyline had their custom xAPI triggers, but we're still using xAPI and the original sort of builder, just because it makes it easy to add variables, because there's a lot of variables like behind the scenes in these projects. Even though I'm not involved in building them, I know there's a lot of work in getting variables and triggers and calculating data and adding it up and sending it in a particular way. So by the time I get it to create the reports, it's all kind of assembled. And so if I know what the variable name is that was used to capture it, I know that what I can use to display it in a dashboard, in the drill downs or in those traffic lights. So earlier when he was talking about planning for the collection and the visualization, that was where a lot of that happens at the start of documenting what your variables you're going to use, so the people who are building it know what to put in, and then I know what to put in for the visualization, and that can all kind of tie together.
I literally I just make them up. I just make up the variable names and stick them in the design documents when I create the design documents. And then if for some reason I've done something kooky, then the developer will change them and change the name on the design document so that we can keep that running forward.
Any other questions, or I missed anything? I will just add one extra thing. The MyMTSS, okay, I can't even say it half the time. That one actually had a little bit of extra data in where you sign in, where you actually choose your district and your facility if you're part of a facility, so that gets added as xAPI extensions, so that later when we are going to create the dashboard to be able to pull up those charts, you have the drop downs, and it uses the same data that the sign-in used, so that you can choose a drop down and say I'm at this district in this facility, and you can just get that data, and it just filters by those extensions.
But that's a good point, Matt, because we had to know how they wanted to differentiate the data too, in order to build that into the login so that we could differentiate the data in those ways.
Right.
All right, so I'm not seeing any other questions. If anyone would like to share the work they're doing in cohort, come up on stage, give us a little update about what you're doing, we welcome you to do that. You just need to let me know in chat, and we'll bring you up and you can talk a little bit. I know there were a couple people who wanted to, but unfortunately, because of work commitments, they couldn't make this particular live session. So I think there was, Did you cover that the visual of the dashboard that you just talked about? Can you show something like that?
Yeah, that was in the presentation, so that will be part of that. Was those pre and post charts that Wendy was showing earlier, so those will be included in the presentation.
Okay, great. So we'll make sure we get that presentation PDF. We'll post it in the resources and recordings on the Slack channel. So that'll be there. And I'll also post it here in the session and as part of the resources for the entire xAPI cohort event. And any other questions, anybody? This was really great, Wendy. Thank you so much for putting this together for us. And yeah, those are kind of some long acronyms. I agree with you, but we do need them because or else you'll be saying like 10 words. So it was great to see this and great to see how you're using xAPI in those case studies. Anyone have another question? Let's see, is there something? Oh, nope, I don't think so. So I am going to go ahead and just share my screen really quickly. And just remember that we want you to attend our xAPI party. And I'm going to drop that link back into chat. We want to thank Wendy Morgan for putting that together, and Matt Kliewer, who was her sidekick here and helping us with the Q&A and looking at everything. So very much appreciate your time and efforts here. And we want to wish everyone here a good rest of your day. And we have one more week, just one more week of cohort. So make sure you tune in next week. All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.